So we were talking about the Steve Nash hire he's the new coach of the Brooklyn Nets, and we were talking about our black coaches. It seems like the perspective from media analysts that black coaches don't get the same kind of opportunity or treatment as white coaches, or I wouldn't say not white coaches. My thing is as previous players who were great players got that same opportunity who happened to be white, like Jason Kidd. We all think that he was a great player. He was a great point guard. It's like, all right, you're a great point guard. You have a great eye for the court. You have great vision, great, sense of how to run an offense. We're gonna make you as a coach because that's what really the coaching is. It's like, okay, we want you. How do you run the offense? What are you gonna do in tight pressure situations? What kind of plays do you call? And the job of a point guard, in which Jason Kidd was, you're an extension of the head coach on the court. Same thing with Steve Nash. He was an extension of the head coach on the court. So I'm not surprised or shocked at those two hires because they were great players. And you could say Jason Kidd was a pretty good coach during this time with the Bucks. Now Brooklyn was a different story, but they didn't give him not much, really anything to work with Brooklyn. I don't even want to talk about the horrible trade for Jason Terry and KG and Paul Pierce. That was doomed from the start. But when he was with Milwaukee, he had really some good success. Especially, he really helped develop Giannis into the MVP that he is. Steve Nash, I don't really think he's gonna. Well, everyone really developed because we all know KD, Kyrie, they're superstars. I want to see how he can develop Karis LeVert more into a really force an all-star. Can he develop Spencer Dinwiddie more? But I mean, you look at Doc Rivers. He was a former player. He was a point guard. I don't think he had much coaching experience, and then he gets hired as the Boston Celtics head coach. Tyronn Lue, okay, he had a lot of coaching experience, but again, he was a really good player. He was a point guard. He played with Shaq and Kobe, and he played against great players at the time of basketball, where you could literally elbow somebody in the throat and they could get away with murder. I'm still gonna keep talking because I need a new microphone, new webcam. But Alvin Gentry, he is a black coach. Alvin Gentry, he hasn't really been panning out as a good coach. Dave Witzel, Mark Jackson. I feel like a lot of people want to talk about that with Mark Jackson was because he was a former player. He was a great player with the Indiana Pacers, and he's a great play-by-play color commentator for ESPN. But he didn't have any prior coaching experience. After he retired, he went straight to the booth, and then it was like, all right, let's hire Mark Jackson. That's what Golden State did. And then I don't know if something happened behind the scenes with that organization that we don't know about, that maybe he's got blackballed. I believe that Mark Jackson should get another coaching job in the NBA. He definitely deserves it. He was the foundation of what you see Golden State is right now because he set the culture of winning culture, winning attitude, and hard work. And he opened the door for Steve Kerr to win those 2 championships. 3 technically.
Yeah,
But
but see, no, go ahead.
I just think that some of them are just reaching just because it really just goes back to Mark Jackson. There's the fact that we don't see Mark Jackson have a head coaching job based on what we see what he did with Golden State. That a lot of players are it's a bit of an overreaction. I can see why. I'm not totally disagreeing with them. I just think that it's a bit overreaction. Maybe Mark Jackson doesn't want to get back on the coaching sidelines. Maybe he's happy being in the booth calling games. We don't know. But if he decides to publicly say, you know what, I want to coach again, he has every right and deserves another coaching job for a team. But we don't know what his true intentions are.
To that point though, we've heard Mark Jackson has said, and it has been, he does want to coach again, but it's just a fact. He's been blackballed. This is no question. Even when you have players stick up for him, there's never been a player. Yes, you've heard that he's hard on religion and stuff like that, and he's very religious. But all these coaches have all these other weird things going on too. Like we see with Miami Dolphins, the coaches were doing coke and stuff. Like Phil Jackson makes his players read books and read all these weird books and stuff. So every coach has this weird thing. So for Mark Jackson to be like very religious shouldn't be the reason why he's being blackballed right now. And he's being blackballed. There's just no way to put it. Every player stood up for him. There's never been a player that's been like, yeah, I hated him while he was a bad coach. Like, no, every player has stood up for him. I just think he probably had an issue with one of those guys in a higher management. And we know once you mess with one owner, is the word's going to get around to all the other owners. Right now. But to that point, again, go back to Ty Lue, go back to Sam Cassell. We can talk about a whole other bunch of players. Jack Vaughn, even though he's still assistant, again, we can keep on going. We can go to shoot. I'm going through looking at this list right now, and there's a good amount of people that could have been Mike Brown, who's with the Warriors right now, who's with KD, and couldn't even get an interview. At least an interview. John Lucas II can't get an interview. He's been coaching for a good while now. Who else? Sam Cassell, as we mentioned already. Um, what's his name? Jerry Stackhouse, another guy that deserves an opportunity. Vin Baker, who's been coaching for a while now, who was a solid player for the Bucks back in the day, should get an opportunity. I can keep on going. Royal Ivy's with the Knicks, who's a friend of KD, who's been assistant coach for a while. He can't get an interview. Maurice Cheeks, we know who he was. He can't get an interview. He's been coaching for a good minute. I keep a John Bryant. Like the list goes on and on. Honestly, when you take an actual look, so I don't completely am just saying like, oh, it's racism, blah blah blah. But you got to see where these guys, like these other guys, like we'll just say like Stephen A. and those guys, like where they have those critical views. You can't be mad because where they come from, they know these older players, or they know that there's these behind the scene guys that have been coaching, were solid players, and haven't even gotten the thing is that the key word is interview. I'm not saying they should be hired, but just an interview. We didn't really hear much about the Nets interviews. I'll give the Knicks credit. They interviewed a good amount of black players, former black players and former black coaches and stuff like that. But around the league, you don't hear much because even when you get an interview, it kind of helps you. Because if you get an interview here, then maybe another team will give you an interview somewhere else. So again, you just got to give them credit because at least an interview, at least like you can't get an interview. So I got to give Stephen A. credit for that because he's right. They can't even get an interview. At least I'm not saying they should be hired. Well, they should be, but not even an interview. That's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. So I'm in between because I love Steve Nash. I think he's going to be he's going to end up being a great coach, but I see it on the opposite side though.
Another name I also forgot to point out, Derek Fisher too. He didn't have any much prior
Yeah,
no
but
coaching
we know
experience at
Phil
all.
Jackson loves the triangle, and I wasn't too
He
surprised.
wanted to implement that.
Right. Yeah. So I don't really count Derek Fisher. If you have point out Jason Kidd, okay, yeah, that's one of very few names. We can go through a list of white coaches who had no experience and got the job. So and we can compare it, and it would not be a fair comparison. So again, it's one of those names are very one of the few. But again, I don't want to bash. Again, this is nothing towards Steve Nash because I think he's going to be a great coach. It's just more of from a wider perspective of where I see Stephen A. coming from.
I also do want to think it could go back to the styles and what they're looking for. Like when Mark Jackson got fired, and I believe he never should have got fired from Golden State because, again, he set the culture and foundation of what they are today. He really was the main reason of them winning those 3 championships. Even though Steve Kerr's like, all right, but if they didn't have that attitude and the foundation and the persona, because Mark Jackson was the one who helped install that in the first place. But when you look at, okay, Mark Jackson, his style of play didn't really fit in what Golden State really had in terms of what lets them to win those 3 championships in 4 years. As you know, Kevin Durant helped out a lot, but Steve Kerr, he's playing a triangle. Steve Kerr is playing in a fast-paced style, fast-paced up-tempo style of play. That correlates to what Steph and Kate. No, it does in a way.
No. Wait, hold on. One second.
First thing you see when they get the rebound, he did play in the triangle.
Steve Kerr played in the triangle is a very slow-paced offense. Now you can
but I'm talking.
You can change it up to it's more fast-paced, but we all know the traditional triangle offense is super slow. And San Antonio when Kerr was with the Spurs, that system was a really slow-paced offense. So you can't even say that.
Hold up, yes I can, because even though you could say he played the triangle, there's in some paces the triangle can be sped up because it's really
not in Phil Jackson.
Everybody, well, especially when he was the Lakers, everybody gets at least to touch the ball probably 5 times because it creates a whole bunch of different scoring options. And it forces the defense to really run around and really play and tires out the defense. But in terms of now, he's like, okay, Steve Kerr is like, all right, well, now we're in the NBA where everyone is just coming to the 3-point line and shooting up threes in fast play style of play. So, okay, well, Steve Kerr, we're gonna interview you. And remember too, Steve Kerr wasn't even supposed to get that job. Before Derek Fisher got it, Phil Jackson wanted to hire Steve Kerr as the coach. It was when Steve Kerr turned it down and was like, wait a minute. Golden State wants me. He had an interview for Golden State. They said, okay, what type of style do you want to play? Because we want to play fast pace, which is everybody's playing fast pace nowadays. You could give credit to Mike D'Antoni because everyone plays fast pace, but he's the one that really been successful with it. And it's like, all right, Steve Kerr will hire you. And then that really led to Phil Jackson hiring Derek Fisher because really Steve Kerr was his first choice. But look at the different styles of play, fast play style of tempo. Like look at Mike D'Antoni, he's white, but his style of play has made Steve Nash a 2-time back-to-back Finals MVP. His style of play and coach style has made James Harden an MVP. Even though there's like you could kind of debate, well, is it effective when it comes to the finals because he never been to a finals in however many long. But the regular season results, he's pretty much made James Harden. James Harden made himself, but he's really elevated James Harden's play just a little bit because of the system that he's in, just a little bit because he puts the ball in James Harden's hands 90% of the time.
I don't want to give D'Antoni that much credit. Yes, D'Antoni is a great offensive-minded coach. I'll give him that. But we all know, even though Houston has changed their defense drastically, but I think that's players. That's the players that they just came into last season before this upcoming season. They came into the offseason saying, "Okay, we got to change. We got to rev up our defense. We got to play harder." I think that's no credit to D'Antoni because he's historically and always been a terrible defensive-minded coach. He can't coach defense to save his life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, to that point,
but and then let me ask you a question. Would we say the same thing if Houston had went on to the NBA Finals? What year did Chris Paul get hurt? Was it 2016 or 2017? When they went on to the NBA Finals? Because remember, they were one game away from beating Golden State. They were one Chris Paul hamstring injury away from beating Golden State because they had Golden State on the ropes, and Mike D'Antoni was the coach at that time. Will we still have the same narrative for Mike D'Antoni? Again, he has never coached defense a day in his life. I can agree with you on that. But if Houston had went on to the NBA Finals, and a lot of people were picking them to beat Cleveland because they already beat Cleveland 2 times that season. I believe it was 16 or 17. I could be wrong. If they had won, would we still have that same stigma carry it to Mike D'Antoni that he's not a good defensive coach or that he's not a good A coach since he's never won the big one?
Well, yeah, because we've seen coaches go to the finals and still get fired. So, and then even if they didn't make it to the finals that year, what about all the other years they got bounced out like the first and second round? Like it doesn't negate all of that. So yeah, no, I can't give D'Antoni that much credit. Again, he's a great offensive-minded coach. But to your point with Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson, how you saying Steve Kerr changed it. He didn't really necessarily run a triangle offense when he's with Golden State. You can see the difference between. Let's look at how the Knicks played when they hired Derek Fisher and how the Warriors played.
I'm not saying he was brought in to run the triangle. I'm just saying he was brought in to play more fast pace up tempo. Because again, he was supposed to be the original hire for the Knicks, and then once he turned that down, he had an interview with Golden State. They said, "Golden State, we want you to play fast pace. Can you do that?" And Steve Kerr was like, "Yeah, no problem," because even though he's mainly pretty much been in triangle, but he's played for more teams than San Antonio and the Lakers, and where other teams has played fast-paced style of tempo. So he's like, okay, I can run that. We have great shooters and Stephen Clay, so we could definitely run that type of style here in Golden State, and he could definitely acquiesce to that.
No, definitely I see that. But this overall, again, I'm in between. I'm not really on one side or the other. I'm just in between because I can see both standpoints.
Yeah, I just think that it's just a little bit of a reach, but mainly I feel like they're just trying to get again, I don't know what happened with Mark Jackson and behind the scenes with Golden State. I just think that he does deserve another head coaching job, but maybe he said something. I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff that goes behind closed doors that we don't know about that's made to the public. So, but again, I'm not complaining with the Steve Nash hire. I don't think it has anything to do with race, especially the guy who was a 2-time former league MVP in the league. He's been numerous All-Star. Same thing with Jason Kidd, who's won a championship with Dallas, numerous All-Star appearances, and who's one of the top, 20 point guards of all time, him and Nash. So there's like, all right, you guys have been both great point guards. the point guard's job is an extension of the coach on the court. I'm not upset about those hires at all. I think more of Nash's hires, like I said again, was to just manage personnel. He'll run some X and O's because he's seen that before. He played against that before, but until he kind of gets comfortable doing that, day in and day out. But mainly right now, his job right now is gonna just be managing personnel in that locker room, especially with Katie and Kyrie, because those two, they are bipolar as hell.
I think I think they get a bad rap, honestly, because with KD, it's like, is he? Yes, he's very defensive. So yeah, you got a decent point on KD, but Kyrie, we've seen how now everybody's saying like, damn, Kyrie was right all this time. I mean, not about like the whole flat Earth thing. Obviously, he's bugging with that, but
The Earth is flat.
just talking about like players' emotions and stuff like that, and we all thought like, oh, he's too emotional, and then we see how the media, not us, but like popular media, they really don't. They do a good job of dehumanizing these players. They make it feel like, oh, these players can't have feelings and stuff. And we've seen now with all these protests and stuff like that, and these players standing up for themselves, we see that Kyrie Irving had a point back, when he was going on these so-called rants and stuff like that. But to KD, you have a point. He can be kind of defensive sometimes, but I think Kyrie kind of gets a bad rap.
Well, if your superstar player has a whole bunch of burner accounts to talk trash about his former team
Yeah,
and
that's what I said.
teammates,
KD,
like,
that's a different story. Like KD,
yeah,
yeah, he's kind of defensive. Like
yeah,
that's kind
I'm
of.
just like, you're Kevin Durant. Like, what are you doing making burner accounts to defend yourself in the first place? Like, your resume speaks for yourself. Like, I don't. You shouldn't care that, oh well, you jump ship to Golden State. No, if he hadn't went to Golden State in the first place, they wouldn't even won those two finals. He was the main difference maker. With Kyrie, you could say he's misunderstood, but I got to go back to the point of when he was with LeBron James. And no matter how people want to say, oh, LeBron is a great teammate. Yeah, he's a great teammate. He brings everybody together. But he does not like to be held accountable for his own mistakes, especially on the defensive side. But he was winning with LeBron. Their second year in Cleveland, he won a championship. And then after that, he's like, you know what? I kind of want my own team. But everybody's like, hold up. You're playing with LeBron James, greatest player ever, who's really, you could kind of see LeBron is starting to give him the baton, because at that point, LeBron was starting to age. I believe LeBron's going to be 33 at that time. He's going to give the baton off to Kyrie. This is your team now. Kyrie was the one who's taking the clutch shots. He took the clutch shot in the 2017 finals that they won. So, and he's like, okay, well, you know what? I want my own team. I was like, okay, you go to your own team in Boston. There's been rumors of swirling that you really didn't get along with much of the players there to begin with. And then we've seen Boston play better without you than with you. And then you go to Brooklyn. You weren't happy, Boston. You go to Brooklyn. Then when the whole, the Black Lives Matter and them going down to the bubble came out, obviously he was very outspoken. We shouldn't play. We should be, continue to protest and put awareness on racial inequality. And again, I was with them on that. But there was a report that also came out that he removed himself from the team's group chat because some of them didn't agree with what he had to say. I'm just like, hold up. You're one of the best players on the team. Because people don't agree with what you have to say, you do something petty as to remove yourself from the team's group chat? I'm like, dude, what next? You're going to come out and the next day in practice, you're going to start cursing us out because we didn't tell you good morning while we stretching or something like that? Like, you don't know what type of personality you're going to get with Kyrie. Like, you go from Cleveland when you were playing with LeBron. You want your own team. Okay, fine. We'll give you your own team. You're in Boston. You don't like some of your players. You don't like some of your teammates. Then they boot you out of there. Or you leave. And then you go to Brooklyn. We're kind of hearing the same stories that we heard from you that when you were in Boston. So it was like, at some point, it's not the other teammates. It's you that's the problem. Now, granted, I see Kyrie. He has a good heart. He comes from a good place. Maybe how he expresses himself isn't the best way to do so. But if we hear multiple stories about you being negative, then it's not the other people. It's you. You know what I mean?
See, I've heard about to that point. I've heard a lot of positive things about Kyrie, and I think a lot of that's overblown. You know how media can be. They can blow a lot of stuff out of proportion and stuff like that. And again, I don't think Brooklyn has such a solid squad, like Dinwiddie and LeVert and Joe Harris and Kyrie. Like when KD comes back and Kyrie comes back, between them and Miami, they're going to be the top teams in the East and probably could likely win the finals. So they're gonna make it work. Like I don't see Kyrie's just gonna be like, oh, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go somewhere. Like, nah. And to your point about Boston, I just think it just wasn't a fit. And then remember, Gordon Hayward got injured, and then it just wasn't a fit. And then but you could tell Tatum and Kyrie, it didn't work because Tatum was coming into his own. You know, Tatum, we've seen the player he's coming into now. I think it didn't work because Kyrie's he needs the ball in his hands. I think it's worked better with Kemba because Kemba is a better facilitator. That's why I liked Kemba over Kyrie when you're talking about coming to the Knicks. I wanted Kemba because he's more willing to pass, but he can take over if he needs to. But he's more ball dominant. But again, I think it's kind of slightly just out of blown out of proportion. The Nets are going to be fine next season, and they have a good chance of making it to the finals. So they're going to be fine.
Last question before I want to ask you before we move on to, I believe we want to talk about the NFL since it's going to be opening day this Thursday. So we talked about Kyrie. He's ball dominant. He needs the ball to be effective. But what's going to happen with Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert? Kevin Durant needs the ball to be effective. Now, I still think Kevin Durant is going to be great, but he's coming off an Achilles injury. That is the toughest injury to ever come back from the sports. The only guys who came back successfully how they were was Dominique Wilkins. Ask DeMarcus Cousins how he was. He was not the same player. If Kobe Bryant was still here, God rest his soul, ask Kobe Bryant, he was not the same player. Ask other guys who tore their Achilles. Isaiah Thomas retired after an Achilles injury. So it is going to be one of the toughest injuries to come back from. I don't think he's going to be, his ability to drive and get to spots that he once was effectively. We're going to see KD be more of a jump shooter, of a jump shot type of player, but he's still going to be great. 80% healthy Kevin Durant is still a top 5 player in his league because he's Kevin Durant. But Kyrie needs the ball to be effective. KD needs the ball to be effective. You're going to have to put the ball in Karis LeVert's hands because we saw what he's capable of doing, especially in the bubble. He could be realistically, he could be a number 2 option on that team if he develops and grows into that because he's a baller. What about Spencer Dinwiddie? He needs the ball in his hands too. Say if they bring back Joe Harris. Joe Harris is going to need some touches from the 3-point line as well. So how is that all going to work when you realistically 4 players who need the ball in their hands to be effective? How is that going to work when you have a ball-dominant point guard and a ball-dominant small forward?
I think it's going to work out fine. You know why? Because to your point, it might even work out better if KD doesn't come back the player he is. Because if he just ends up being even though he's injured, he never was a player that took super elevation taking a jump shot. He's like nearly 7 feet tall, has a huge wingspan. Even if he doesn't have, the explosiveness, he's not going to need it because you still can't block his shot. You still can't block that shot. So if he becomes a jump shooter, it might even work out being better because then that's going to give Kyrie more things to work with. You have Dinwiddie, you have LeVert. Probably you're going to have either you're going to trade one of them, and I could see that happening because, in the next couple of seasons, you're going to have to pay all those guys, and you're not going to be able to afford that, especially if they keep Jared Allen. Jared Allen, even though he hasn't been the player I thought he was going to be yet, he's going to get paid soon. So it's like they're going to have to trade one of them. I could see it happening this offseason because they need another big man. I would get if they can get maybe – say if Utah decides to just blow up the whole team, maybe you get a Rudy Gobert. I think a Rudy Gobert would be a solid pickup for them if they choose to trade Dinwiddie or LeVert. But all four of those guys, LeVert, Dinwiddie, Kyrie, KD, I don't think they're all going to play together. They could, but I don't think they're all going to be at the same. One of them is going to come off the bench. I can see it probably being either LeVert or Dinwiddie. And for you to win a champ, if they have a great shot at winning the championship. Even if KD doesn't come back, because he's going to be a distraction. Because you got to respect KD, whether he's hurt, whatever. You got to respect him. 2, he's still going to have that jumper. I don't think this Achilles injury is going to mess up his jump shot at all. He doesn't need that much elevation. He's super tall. You can't block his shot regardless. So you got to respect him, and he's probably not going to want the ball as much. Kyrie's still going to do his thing. You have Dinwiddie or LeVert, cutting, slashing to the rim, and then you have Jared Allen in the post, and then you have Joe Harris. If they double team Kyrie, pass it to Joe Harris for the 3-point shot. It's going to work out perfectly for them, and I think Nash is going to he's the guy that he's played. Nash has played with some of the top talent. He's played with Charles Barkley, of course. I believe. I believe he played with Stoudemire. He's played with I believe he played with Dwight Howard when he was with the Lakers, and obviously Kobe and stuff. So I think Nash is gonna find a way. He's gonna, even though Von's gonna be calling a lot of stuff. I think Nash is gonna add a little flavor to his kind of coaching style too. But I think it's gonna end up working. Like, you can't say the Nets aren't gonna be a top, worst case scenario, a top 5 team in the East. Like, you can't, like, who are you gonna take? Like, Philly? No. The Knicks? No. Charlotte? No. Milwaukee, they could lose Giannis. If they lose Giannis, no.
Well, Giannis is going to be a free agent after next year.
Right, but I'm just saying, say if Milwaukee wanted to trade him now, is what I'm saying. You feel me? Especially if
he wants out, yeah.
Right. And if, like, say for example, if they know he's not coming back after his contract's up, then the smart thing to do would be to trade him this offseason, so that way you don't lose him for nothing. If he just decides to leave. So that is a very good chance Giannis could get traded this offseason. So with that, you don't see Milwaukee. I don't see Milwaukee being better without him. So again, that's going to be fine. They're going to be way better than they were this past season, and I think that's going to end up working out. That whole team, they're going to end up meshing together.
Well, I do know Steve Nash got his hands full with Kevin Durant. Mainly Kevin Durant is the biggest personality on that team. He's got his hands full with him, but they got a good relationship. I think that'll be fine. Mainly is really with Kyrie. He needs to. You can say Kyrie just misunderstood, but bro, like, if you have a disagreement with your team, don't just remove yourself from the group chat, because that's just petty. There's no need to do that.